Welcome back everyone, Ronan here. Just want to share my Lone Wolf build that I had going on for me in Honor mode. I went with Mage Ranger and actually went fairly well. I didn't run into many problems. I had to adjust as the game went on, mainly for the gear I was getting. And early on, you don't have much crowd control abilities, and my Mage actually was my tank. I gave her a shield, and as I progressed, I just used dual wands for the extra stats. I never used wands past level 6. I had enough spells. So, I'm not going to cover the gear because really that's going to be random for the most part. As for weapons, I only have one in Tenebrium, the one you get from the skill book. I think towards the end, what ended up happening is I had so many points that I could just throw wherever I wanted that I put a few in here. The bulk of my points are in skills. What I did is I mastered 3 skills. Witchcraft would have been fun to play around with the skills. I only got to play around with Death Punch. You want to have your leadership at 5, and if you can, 6, but don't spend too many points in there. You can do it with gear. I had Lore Master to 3, and after that I used gear, and nothing in Nasty Deeds. This is just sneaking from gear apparently. I went with all skilled up at the beginning for that slight boost with those points, which helped in the beginning, but were kind of useless towards the end. Bigger and better, 1 extra point, it's always good. Far Out Man was probably one I started out with. Lightning Rod I got because I wouldn't be able to get stunned, so that was kind of handy because I often used lightning spells while I'm standing in water. So instead of moving, I could just sit there and not get stunned. I started with Lone Wolf, which means I can't use Glass Cannon, but Lone Wolf is actually pretty strong. It's a pretty good passive. Pet Pal, just for some of the quests, so I could talk to the animals. Walk It Off, I think I just started getting things just because there's Escapist could have been handy. I didn't feel I had to run so much because I could CC the crap out of the enemies. For the Mage portion, I'm going to show some of the skills that are like really overpowered. You want to get these skills. Once you get to 15, Hail is just ridiculous. Like, I have a video where I did my kill, my first blind kill of the boss, and I killed him in, what, a turn? So this hits like 30 times. Oh, she got hit. The AoE is a little bit bigger than it shows on the circle. Be mindful of that. But if you can start the fight by freezing the enemy, I mean, you basically just won. I love the touch skills with Far Out Man. These are really handy. They only cost 3 AP to use. These you definitely want to have because it often works to freeze the enemy or stun them if you go for the lightning version. I'm not a big fan of Geomancer. Not that it's bad, especially if you only have one character. Ice and Wind go better together for crowd control than Fire and Geomancer. Those are more like a damage combination than a crowd control combination. For lightning, you have Storm and Chain Lightning. Those are really amazing. Chain Lightning is not as good, but you can use it. I think it's at level 12 instead of 15. And basically, you just hit the first one, and it does a big chain to all the other ones in the area. And the chance of stunning is pretty high. Storm, though, basically has the range of rain. It can't hit your group. It will target enemies and stun them. I think it targets 10 enemies. It doesn't matter where they are in that circle. Generally, it's closer to the middle, and it will stun. If there's only one person, it will hit them 8 to 10 times. It costs 11 AP, but with Lone Wolf, I get 12 per turn. So I could use on the first turn, I could use Hail. Second turn, use Storm to keep them stunned. And some of them might break out of their frozen status, but still be stunned, and then I can use my Meteors. So in 3 turns, if something's still breathing, it's not for long. Just like Meteors, insane. Because they do about 85 to 90 damage each, and there's 30 of them. Infectious Flame is not as good as Chain Lightning, I found. It does hit, a decent amount of them, but it works basically just like Flare. You hit one, but then it's gonna move on to a different one. One thing I do like about certain skills is that some of them, if you're blind or you can't see past a puff of smoke, you can use a fireball and if you know the general area of the enemy, or you can still see them, you can still target them with Fireball. Flare, same thing, you can kind of put it where you want it. Hopefully you hit the enemy just by his feet. Ice Shard, you can do the same. All of the ones that are area effect. So Oil Puddles, you know, you can drop that and then just extend the flame radius. And then you can do the same with a Boulder Bash. Battering Ram, it says requires their melee weapon. I guess wands don't count as a melee weapon. So I gave her a mallet in the beginning and she was charging in, and then using Thunder Jump to jump around so she could move in and out of the fight. Bitter Cold is really good because it only costs 2 AP and it often freezes somebody. So if they're already wet, use it. For the stats, focus on what you're comfortable with. Now, because I only have 2 characters, I added a few points of strength for gear. Depending on what gear I got, and I needed strength to wear it. I think I had an axe in this hand, so that's why I have 10 strength. 3 was from gear, but just so I could wear certain strength gear that was actually good for a mage. But intelligence should be your main focus, and speed, get to a number that you're comfortable with so that you get enough AP per turn, and make sure that your constitution can support it. If you look constitution, I only really have 7, so I have 7 strength, 7 constitution, 13 int, 9 speed, which that's a pretty good number, and perception. I'm at 10, but really I'm only at 5 because all my perception is from gear. This will end the portion of the guide for the mage. This worked out really well for me. After level 15, everything was just dropping dead. Like, it was overpowered, really. Now let's look at the ranger. For those of you that want to know the other half, the ranger was more or less my DPS class / support for the first half, and then on the second half he just basically picked off targets. I'm gonna go straight to abilities. Weapon, I got crossbow because I am a big fan of crossbows compared to bows in this game. I like the fact that you can shoot a lot faster. They nerfed it before, but you can cancel the animation by right clicking after a shot. So you just shoot, cancel the animation, shoot again. And it's instant, unlike the bow where he winds the bow up and then lets go. If you try to use a bow and animation cancel, you'd actually have to wait for the arrow to go out. So if I were to use a bow, then your animation cancel. So you have to wait for that shot to go out. Tenebrium, base 2, so I got 1 boost. I got base 2, I think one of the weapons I was using at one point was needing more Tenebrium. Defense, I started putting more points in defense, so this was just points that I had spare. Skills, alright, I only have 9 compared to my wizard that has 22. I got my expert marksman, 1 man-at-arms, and that's for slingshot, because he was the one in charge of grenades. I had nobody else to be in charge of grenades, so I wanted to throw that extra 5 meters. Scoundrel to 3, that was mainly to use cloak and dagger. You need level 3 to be able to only use 4 AP instead of 6, because my ranger can't move worth a crap, and the only reason why he can move a little bit better is because he's got lots of speed. You basically are a stationary turret because you just don't move very far per turn. In the beginning I was at personality 2, and with gear a little bit higher, whatever I was stealing and trying to sell and craft, he was the one doing everything. That's why his inventory is so full. He's my salesman. I also kept most of my scrolls on him, and that gave me a big advantage because then I could use a lot more of these meteor strikes and lightning storms, and it did come in handy for some fights. I think the way I killed the Source Wizard, or the retired Source Wizard, was using Lightning Storm Scroll. I didn't try to do anything fancy. I just plain out just killed him 1 turn. Leadership 6, so base 3, and then from gear. Leadership is amazing. You should always have leadership. The initiative boost, let's go over here. You get 1 willpower, not a huge deal, but it's better than nothing. It gives you a bit of a boost. Initiative plus 10. This almost guarantees you will get the first turn. Almost every pull, unless it's a boss that has a ridiculous amount of initiative. And getting the first hit, especially if you have to crowd control, this is probably the most important because you have to crowd control everything with only 2 characters. If you get crowd controlled, then you're probably going to die. Chance to hit, 10%. So in this case, it's not a big deal. Plus 10% damage. More damage is always nice. Armor plus 10, not a big deal. Crit chance plus 3 is still pretty important. His crit chance is 41%. The biggest one to reach level 5, why you want this, is immunity to fear. If you can't get feared, that's again, you're not getting crowd controlled. So you want that immunity to fear. Leadership does wear off if you stealth, people can't see you, then you don't get the benefit from leadership. If there's smoke in between you, you don't get the benefit. So you have to take that into account when you're moving, and take that into account when you're noticing the enemy has leadership. You can separate that from them, because then they don't get those buffs, which that can be really important in certain fights. Lucky Charm. I love Lucky Charm, but don't get more than 2, mainly because if you use Survivor's Karma, I use that whenever I open a box. Lucky Charm plus 2, so don't get more than 3. I do notice the difference that I find better items and more often. Craftsmanship. He was my crafter. He basically took care of all the crafting. To me, that was a bit of a waste of points. It's a good thing I only stopped at 3 for my base. I really only crafted maybe the last 2 hours of the game. So for me, it wasn't really a good investment. I could have used them somewhere else, but at the same time, I didn't really have anywhere else. And then Nasty Deeds. Sneaking is almost garbage now as a combat stat. You can get away with using Walk in Shadows instead of Sneak. So as long as you're only sneaking for about 30 seconds and you're okay with that, then just use Walk in Shadows. So I got lockpicking, base 2, but with gear I can bring it to 5. So that saves me 12 points because I only went to base 2. That's pretty huge. I mean, if you have to spend 12 more points to do the same thing you can do when you just carry around some spare gear that has lockpicking on it. Depends on your luck though, because the gear is random. Pickpocketing, I don't use it. I know there's a benefit to it. 2 sets of skills instead of 4. To me, that wasn't needed. If you really need money, then sure. But late game, you won't need the money. You'll have more than enough either way, especially if you craft, and there's lots of ways to make money in this game. I really liked Elemental Ranger, so once you hit Expert Marksman level 5, I would get this. It added quite a bit of damage sometimes, and I noticed that for some reason, sometimes I would do Tenebrium damage. Light Stepper. I am not paranoid, but I hate missing out on loot and not finding traps. And I was especially scared because I didn't know all the traps, especially in the later areas. So I went with Light Stepper. My 15 perception, and that helps me a lot to find all the special items. So you don't have to waste money if you know where they are. It saves you money because you don't have to pick them up from the secret vendor in the end of time. Lone Wolf got it right at the beginning. It's pretty handy. If you plan on going Lone Wolf, you may as well do it right from the beginning. Pinpoint, so that my grenades never miss. I still miss that one if you watch a part of my stream, but Pinpoint makes it so when you target on the ground, that's where it goes, just like a spell. I am a hoarder, so I didn't use a lot of these. Same thing, Slingshot, I wanted them to go 5 meters more. Now, if you think about it, like that's pretty far to throw a grenade. Because the AoE is so big, it's basically 20 meters for that grenade. It's really good. I would recommend getting down to Warrior more than a Ranger. And Scientist. So this saves you a lot of points towards your blacksmithing and crafting. So since it's both, if you plan on doing any crafter, then I recommend getting Scientist. It saves you essentially 10 points if you think about it, if you don't count your gear. Maybe I would consider Pack Mule. I don't have a strength-based character, but because of my gear, it was acceptable. Okay, I'm going to look at the gear real quick. So plus 5 from gear. All my strength is from gear. Dexterity, plus 11. Your dexterity is only really there to shorten your cooldowns. Since it only boosts your chance to hit, you don't really need to stack dexterity that high. I think it's just basically the gear I had. Oh, plus I added some Tormented Souls to my weapon, so I could probably lower that a bit. Intelligence, you don't need any. It used to be you needed for your sarongs, but that's not the case anymore. Constitution, I recommend only getting the amount you need for your action points. If you find that you have spare points, ensure puts them in. It increases your survivability. Like if you look, I have 2200 HP almost, and my mage has 2400. If I use Water of Life, 3250 almost. Like that's pretty huge, almost 3 grand in health. And I only have 10 points in Constitution. Lone Wolf boosts by 70%. It makes you much better at surviving the fights, even though you only have 2 characters. Speed, again, find a point where you have enough action points for yourself. So that's a quick look at the build. What I would recommend getting on your Ranger, especially if you're playing Lone Wolf, get your Ranger, your Winged Feet. He's going to be your trap detector for the most part. Perception also helps with those far shots. It increases your crit rate, your initiative, start action points, your ability to detect traps, and the accuracy when shooting over long distances. It's a lot more important for a Ranger to have this stat than it is for a Rogue. If I'm using both, then I would recommend just not taking Perception on the Rogue and take it on the Ranger so he can at least benefit from the farther shots. Now, if an enemy is crowd controlled, you will get 100% chance to hit on that enemy, so you don't need the higher dexterity for that reason. Walk into shadows because you're not going to be using stealth, so if you use this, you can steal all the items you want. Cloak and Dagger because I can move a lot farther for the AP value than just walking. Trip was handy only a few times when the enemy was really close to me. Arrows. You have lots of arrows, lots of crowd control potential. Ricochet is really nice. It's basically a weaker version of Chain Lightning. Hit one enemy and it hits a few more. Splintered Arrow is amazing. You don't have any abilities that hit... If you don't have line of sight, it hits through smoke, you're blind, whatever, you can't see the enemy and he's around a corner. You can use Splintered Arrow. The range is massive, which that's the skill's downfall, but if you can target 1, maybe 2 enemies, now, let's say they're low health, or you only have 1 and you can kind of seclude them. Basically what it does is it splits the damage. It's a high damage ability, so if you can just target the 1 character in it, then you'll get the full damage on that 1 instead of splitting it on multiple. Nick. I have Spider on my Mage, so I didn't need any other summons. So Nick is awesome. He is probably the best summon in the game, in my opinion. Especially since he's a zombie. A lot of enemies don't factor that in, so they hit him with poison, and he heals. So he's an amazing tank in a second map. Seer, I can't stress that enough. Plus 50% chance to hit for 4 turns. This is amazing, and it boosts the range. So right now, I can hit all the way here, or at least it boosts your sight range. So then if I use Seer, there's my circle. So it stops here. Yeah, it's farther. You can see it was over here. Now it's way over there. There you go. So it gives you that small boost that you can use your auto attacks farther. Use it because the nice thing about the plus 50% chance to hit is you combine this with range power stance. Now, range power stance reduces your chance to hit by 20%. If the enemy is CC'd, doesn't matter. If he's not, and you have Seer up, it still won't matter. You're still getting a 30% boost. You will more likely hit them. Arrow spray is nice, only if they're really close to you. You see the size of the cone, you start shooting all these arrows. If they're far and you're not hitting the same target all the time, it's not that useful. It doesn't do all that much damage. They definitely don't do 254 per arrow. Most enemies are resistant to piercing, so it actually, I'd say, do about half. It's not as strong as it seems, but if you have a troll right in front of you, then yeah, have at it. It's gonna, if you can hit 1 target with all of them, that's pretty good. In rain of arrows, that is probably your best skill. The area is pretty big, and it hits everything. It doesn't just hit one thing. It hits everything. It doesn't split the damage. With power stance, it said it did over 1700 damage potentially. That's pretty huge. You can use it if you don't have line of sight, so it's a really good skill to use. Hopefully this helps you out. I know there's a lot of builds out there. I don't know if I'll have the time to do another honor mode Lone Wolf, or at least Tactician Lone Wolf. It'd be interesting to see what other builds are out there, and if I can get away from using the Mage. The Mage is just so overpowered in Divinity Original Sin. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good night, everyone.